What would life be like if the only person who was supposed to protect them became the source of their greatest suffering? This question haunted Kristen every day. From a young age, she learned to cope with the chaos at home, where her mother, consumed by addiction, was more of a shadow than a maternal figure. The house, an old building in a decaying neighborhood in the United States, reflected the emotional disorder that permeated their lives. The peeling walls and worn furniture were silent witnesses to the constant fights and neglect that suffocated the love that once existed between them. At just 16 years old, Kristen found herself forced to take responsibility for her younger sisters, Cynthia and Sarah. She struggled to create a safe environment amidst the chaos, preparing simple meals and telling bedtime stories, trying to ward off the nightmares of reality. While her friends dreamed of parties and boys, Kristen only dreamed of a united home where they could all be happy. She remembered moments when the family was together before alcohol became the protagonist of their lives. Those moments, however scarce, were her fuel and the motivation that drove her to fight. Kristen's dream was not just a childish fantasy, it was a visceral necessity. When, on a fateful night, her mother's neglect culminated in the separation of the sisters, and each was taken to a different home, Kristen's world crumbled. She found herself alone, lost in a sea of uncertainties, but the determination to reunite her sisters became her mission. The pain of separation guided her, and each day became a struggle to discover where they were and how she could bring them back. Amidst this search, Kristen found small moments that made her reflect on her life. During a visit to a local cafe, she encountered an elderly woman who, noticing her sad gaze, asked her, "Do you believe things can get better?" This question lingered with her, making her ponder her own future and what she was willing to sacrifice to achieve her goal. Kristen realized that hope was not just an empty word, but a powerful force that could help her face the challenges ahead. Kristen's journey would not be easy. She would not only face the resistance of the system that separated her family, but also her own insecurities and fears. At every corner, she would find people reflecting her struggles, like a young man who had lost his family in an accident and was still trying to move forward. These interactions would teach her valuable lessons about human resilience and the importance of never giving up, even when everything seemed lost. As Kristen delved deeper into her quest, she constantly remembered her mother's words, "Family is all we have." This phrase echoed in her mind, challenging her to understand what it truly meant to be a family. With a heavy heart and renewed determination, Kristen was ready to face the obstacles that would arise in her path, determined to rebuild the broken bonds and rediscover the love that once united the three sisters. The journey was just beginning, and their fate depended on the courage of a young girl willing to fight against all odds. Kristen woke up once again with the feeling that the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The morning light filtered through the torn curtains, illuminating the messy room that was now her temporary shelter. She got up, stretching as she tried to push away dark thoughts. It was a new day, but worries followed her like unwanted shadows. Where would Cynthia and Sarah be? Their separation still hurt like an open wound, and the despair of not knowing how to find them consumed her. That morning, she decided to go to the community center, where she often met people in similar situations. The place was a sort of refuge, a space where stories of pain intertwined and formed a web of mutual support. Upon arrival, she encountered Lucas, a young man with sad eyes who always tried to put on a smile. He had lost his parents in a car accident 2 years ago and had been struggling to find his place in the world ever since. "Hi, Kristen. How are you today?" Lucas asked, his tone optimistic. but Kristen could see the sadness hidden behind his smile. "I'm trying to figure out how to bring my sisters back," Kristen replied, frustration evident in her voice. "But it seems that with each passing day, it gets harder." Lucas tilted his head, his expression becoming more serious. "Sometimes the struggle feels endless, but you have to believe that you can make it. Every step counts." Kristen took a deep breath, trying to absorb his words. The truth was, she felt like she was in a maze, not knowing which direction to take. The child protection system was an unyielding monster, and she had no idea how to confront it. Her mind was always filled with doubts. Would anyone listen to her? Would she be able to reunite the family in the end? "You don't have to carry that weight alone, you know that, right?" Lucas insisted, sensing her internal struggle. "We can search together. I know some people who can help." Kristen hesitated. The idea of accepting help felt strange yet comforting at the same time. She had always been the responsible one, the one who took care of her sisters. Asking for help felt like a sign of weakness, but looking at Lucas, she saw a bit of herself in him. He was also struggling, and perhaps together they could find a way. "Would you really do that?" she asked, hope beginning to blossom in her heart. "Of course. No one should go through this alone," Lucas replied, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "Let's find out where your sisters are and how to bring them back." From that day on, Kristen's routine began to change. She and Lucas became a team, joining forces to seek information about Cynthia and Sarah. Each visit to the community center turned into a new mission, and every conversation was an opportunity to learn something new. But as they delved deeper into the search, Kristen began to feel the pressure of the real world. Bureaucracy was overwhelming, and the doubtful looks from social workers made her nervous. With every no she heard, her determination wavered. "You need to be stronger, Kristen. They need to see that you are capable," Lucas encouraged her. But his words echoed in her mind like a double-edged sword. The pressure to be perfect made her feel even more insecure. And when a social worker questioned her ability to care for her sisters, doubt settled in like a dark cloud. "What if I'm not good enough? What if they don't believe in me?" Kristen whispered one afternoon as they sat on a park bench. "You are good enough," Lucas said firmly. "You just need to believe it. Think of everything you've done for them. You are the only one who cares enough to fight." But the fight was hard, and Lucas's words felt insufficient in moments of despair. Kristen began to question herself. What if she never got her sisters back together? What if the life she dreamed of continued to be a distant illusion? These uncertainties followed her like shadows, and with each passing day, she felt more vulnerable. On a cloudy afternoon, while walking home after another day of frustrating attempts, Kristen encountered a woman sitting on a bench, staring into space. She had grey hair and a sad expression. Something in the way the woman looked at her made Kristen stop. "Are you lost?" the woman asked, with a gentle voice that seemed to embrace Kristen's pain. I just want my family back," Kristen replied, and tears began to slide down her face. "Family is complicated," the woman said, looking at the horizon. "Sometimes we need to get lost to find our way back. But don't give up. Love is a powerful force." Kristen absorbed the woman's words, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. Love could be the answer, but how could she find it amidst the chaos that was her life? Days turned into weeks and the search continued. Kristen and Lucas faced many challenges, but little by little, she began to realize that even in the face of difficulties, there was a path forward. The fight for her sisters was not just an external quest, but also an internal journey of self-discovery. She needed to learn to trust herself and, more importantly, to believe that she deserved to be happy. One day, looking in the mirror, Kristen saw someone different. She was no longer the scared girl who felt alone. She was a determined young woman, ready to face the world, and even though the road was still filled with uncertainties, she knew she was not alone. With Lucas by her side and the memory of her sisters in her heart, Kristen was ready to fight, not just for them, but for herself. The journey was just beginning, and she was determined to find her way back home. Kristen felt as if she were in an endless cycle of attempts and failures. Each visit to the social worker was a cruel reminder that her fight for Cynthia and Sarah would not be easy. One day, after a meeting in which the worker had questioned her ability to care for her sisters, Kristen left the office with a heavy heart. The doubtful look he cast her way seemed to echo in her mind. What if I'm really not good enough? As she walked through the streets, doubts consumed her. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, and she wondered if she had what it took to be the sister her sisters needed. Remembering happy moments with the two, a wave of sadness engulfed her. There had been so much love between them, but now it felt so distant, like a memory slipping through her fingers. That night, Kristen decided to meet Lucas at the community center. He always encouraged her, but the pressure of his expectations began to feel like a burden. When they sat in a quiet corner, she hesitated before speaking. "Lucas, what if everything I'm doing is in vain? What if I never get them back?" Lucas looked at her with concern. "Kristen, you can't think like that. The fight is worth it, even when it seems difficult. You're doing what you can. And if what I can do isn't enough?" The question came out more bitter than she intended. Kristen realized that her frustration was not only with the system, but also with herself. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "You're overwhelming yourself. Sometimes we need to take a step back to see the bigger picture. Let's try a different approach. What do you think about looking for someone who knows the system better? A lawyer, or even a support group?" Kristen felt a faint glimmer of hope, but also a shadow of skepticism. What if they don't care? What if I'm just another sad story? You're not just a sad story, Kristen. Your fight is real. You care, and that makes all the difference. Lucas smiled, but Kristen's insecurity didn't completely dissipate. In the days that followed, Kristen decided to open up to the idea of seeking professional help. Together, she and Lucas found a support group that offered legal guidance. However, the first meeting was a shock. Listening to the stories of others, Kristen realized that her situation was not unique. There were so many stories of pain, of people also trying to reunite their families. But at the same time, each account seemed to deepen its own sadness. Kristen whispered to Lucas as soon as they left the meeting, "It's harder than I thought. I didn't know so many people were struggling, and yet I feel so alone." "You're not alone," Lucas insisted, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're all in this together. You have to remember that every story is different, and yours is powerful." Kristen wanted to believe that, but the pressure of reality hit her like a wave. Weeks went by, and each new obstacle felt more challenging. One day, upon receiving a letter from the social worker informing her that the sisters could be relocated to another family, Kristen's hope crumbled. She spent the night awake, thinking about what she could have done differently. Why can't I do this? Despair overwhelmed her, and the idea of a permanent separation left her paralyzed. The next morning, Lucas found her at the community center, and his worried expression did not go unnoticed. "Kristen, are you okay? You look different." "I can't stand this. What if I lose my sisters forever? Her voice was choked with emotion. We'll figure this out, Lucas said, holding her hands. We need to take action. You can't give up. Remember what you once said, love is a powerful force. Let's use it to our advantage. She sat in her room, surrounded by pictures of her sisters. The memory of their laughter and play was a double-edged sword. It brought comfort, but also pain. What am I doing? Am I sacrificing myself for something that may not happen? Tears streamed down her face as she reflected on her journey. On the morning of the meeting, the tension was palpable. Kristen and Lucas arrived at the lawyer's office, and Kristen's anxiety was evident. Kristen hesitated, but Lucas's determination inspired her not to give up. Together, they began to plan a new approach. With the help of the support group, they managed to schedule a meeting with a lawyer specializing in custody cases. For Kristen, this represented a new chance, but anxiety consumed her. What if I make a mistake? What if my chance to reunite the family slips away again? The night before the meeting, Kristen couldn't sleep. During the conversation, the lawyer touched on points that made her even more insecure. He spoke about how difficult the fight would be and how ruthless the system could be. With every word, Kristen felt her heart tighten more. What if I can't do it? What if everything I'm doing is in vain? Lucas, noticing her distress, whispered, "Remember, you're not alone. We're in this together." These words were a small comfort, but the fight was far from over. As days passed, Kristen began to realize that the difficulties she faced were not just obstacles, but lessons. She started to understand that life was not made of guarantees and that sometimes the path to happiness was filled with uncertainties. Each twist brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth. The love she felt for her sisters became her driving force, and the idea of failing transformed into a push to fight even harder. Kristen knew the journey would be long and filled with ups and downs. However, looking at Lucas and the people who supported her, she felt a new determination. Now she was not just fighting for her sisters, she was fighting for herself, for a future where she could finally feel whole. With each step, she grew stronger, and hope, though fragile, still shone in her heart. Kristen felt as though she was in a dark maze, where each attempt to find the exit led her to more confusion and despair. After the meeting with the lawyer, she left the office with an unbearable weight on her chest. His words still echoed in her mind. The system is complicated. You need to be prepared for the challenges ahead. The reality that she might never get her sisters back felt more tangible than ever. As she walked the streets, tears streamed down her face. The sky was grey, reflecting her sadness. Was I selfish to believe I could take care of them? Should I have let another family adopt them? These questions consumed her, and with every negative answer she found, her confidence dwindled. The thought that her sisters could be taken away from her seemed like a nightmare that was becoming more real. That night, Kristen decided to step away from everything, seeking a moment of peace amid the chaos. She sat in a park and watched the children play. Their laughter was a painful reminder of what she had lost. She remembered a sunny day when she was with Cynthia and Sarah in the same park, running and laughing, carefree. The contrast between that happy moment and her current reality was unbearable. How did I get here? Kristen asked herself, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. But at the same time, a small voice inside her began to emerge. You can't give up. They need you. Kristen closed her eyes, trying to connect with that inner strength. The idea of giving up what she had built with her sisters left her even more distressed. She knew the love she felt for them was strong, but doubt paralyzed her. What was stronger, love or insecurity? The next morning, Kristen decided that she needed to face her fears. Instead of letting sadness take over, she chose to channel her pain into action. The support group meeting was approaching, and this time she would go not just as a participant, but as someone seeking solutions. As she entered the room, she felt her heart race. Familiar faces greeted her, but she still felt a little distant, as if she were observing everything from the outside. When it was her turn to share, the words began to flow. "I am struggling to bring my sisters back home," she said, her voice trembling. "But with each passing day, I feel like I am failing them. The social worker doubts me, and I am starting to doubt myself too." A respectful silence filled the room. After a few moments, an older woman with a gentle expression raised her hand. "I have been through this too. It's painful and challenging, but remember that you are not alone. The love you feel for your sisters is a powerful motivator. Don't let the doubts take that away from you." Her words penetrated deep into Kristen's heart. She realized she was not alone in her struggle. There were others there facing similar battles. The sharing of experiences and empathy awakened something inside her. The pain she felt transformed into a flame of determination. "I can do this," she thought. As she left the meeting, a new energy pulsed within her. Kristen decided she would no longer let doubts consume her. That moment of vulnerability had been necessary, but now she was ready to take action. It took time for Kristen to start believing in herself again, but she began to realize that facing the mistakes of the past was part of the process. "I am not perfect," she reflected, "but that doesn't mean I can't be a good sister." In the days that followed, Kristen began to educate herself about the foster care system. She read everything she could about custody rights and met with other members of the support group to discuss strategies. Every small step she took felt like a victory. She was determined to show the social worker that she was capable and that her sisters deserved to be with her. One day, while reviewing some documents, she found a photo of her sisters at a birthday party. They were smiling, their eyes shining with happiness. Kristen felt a wave of love and longing that almost made her cry. "They need me," she thought, and her determination grew stronger. "I can't let them down. I can't fail." When the day of the next meeting with the social worker arrived, Kristen was nervous but determined. She reviewed her notes, prepared to answer any questions, and, more importantly, was ready to assert her love for Cynthia and Sarah. Deep down, she knew her struggle was not just for them, but also for herself. It was about finding her strength and her worth. At the end of the meeting, when the social worker praised her for her progress and dedication, something changed within her. The doubt that had once paralyzed her began to dissipate. Kristen realized that regardless of the outcome, she was becoming the sister she had always meant to be. And although the path was still filled with uncertainties, she knew the fight was worth it. The love she had for her sisters became the light that illuminated her way, and hope, though fragile, was now a constant companion. Kristen sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and notes. The social worker had acknowledged her progress, but the initial euphoria soon gave way to a whirlwind of insecurities. What if I'm not good enough? What if all of this is in vain? These thoughts haunted her, even after she had prepared so well. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but doubt nestled in her heart like a shadow. She stood up and began to walk around the room, looking at the pictures of her sisters that decorated the walls. The image of Cynthia and Sarah, their joyful expressions frozen in time, tugged at her heart. "They don't deserve to live like this, away from me," she murmured to herself. The determination she had felt in the meeting with the social worker now seemed like a flickering flame, threatened by a cold breeze of uncertainties. That night, as the silence of the house enveloped her, Kristen picked up her phone and decided to call a friend, Laura, who had always supported her. "Hi, Laura."
I'm feeling so lost. I had a meeting today, but I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Kristen said, her voice trembling. Laura listened attentively. Kristen, you are doing the best you can. Remember that every step counts. What matters is that you are fighting for your sisters, she replied, trying to encourage her. But what if I fail? What if all of this ends badly? Kristen questioned, feeling the tears start to slip down again. You can't think like that.
Look at how much you have already achieved. The very fact that you are working hard to improve is a victory. And more importantly, you are showing them that you care, Laura said, her voice firm. Those words were a balm for Kristen's soul. She realized that her struggle was not just for her sisters, but also for herself. Thank you, Laura. I really needed to hear that, she replied, feeling a little lighter. In the days that followed, Kristen began to focus on small victories. She enrolled in a course on custody rights and started taking notes on what she learned. Each filled page was a reminder that she was moving toward a greater goal. But even with this new focus, the doubts did not completely disappear. In moments of solitude, she found herself questioning her ability to be a good sister, to be a good mother to them. With each passing week, the pressure mounted. Kristen felt that the struggle was leaving marks on her life. Work was becoming increasingly difficult to balance with her studies and commitments in the support group. Guilt piled up. I'm failing in every area, she thought. This feeling of inadequacy followed her even in the simplest moments, like meeting friends for coffee. She couldn't relax, always thinking about her sisters. One afternoon, when she ran into Laura at a cafe, the tension overflowed. I can't take it anymore, Laura. I'm so tired. The expectations placed on me are so high, and I don't know if I can reach them, she confided, her voice choked. Laura looked at her with compassion. Kristen, you don't have to be perfect. Everyone has their struggles. What matters is that you're trying. That's already much more than many people do, she said, holding Kristen's hand. And don't forget, your mistakes don't define who you are. You're learning and growing every day. Those words brought new relief. Kristen began to realize that her failures were not the end of the world, but rather part of a growth process. She decided to give herself permission to make mistakes and learn from them. Maybe I don't have all the answers right now, but I'm going to keep fighting, she told herself in a moment of introspection. With this new perspective, Kristen started to open up more to the support group. She shared her insecurities and listened to others' stories. She saw that she was not alone in her struggle. There were people facing similar challenges, and everyone was there to support each other. The connection she formed with those around her helped her see the strength she had within herself. Meanwhile, her relationship with Laura deepened. They began to meet more frequently, and each meeting served to replenish Kristen's courage. Laura became a kind of anchor, always ready to remind her of her worth. Over time, Kristen began to notice changes in herself. She was more confident in her interactions and at the same time, kinder to herself. The search for her sisters was not just a struggle, but also a journey of self-discovery. She began to wonder what it really meant to be a good sister and what that entailed in terms of love and support. Kristen realized that she needed to be her own support, to believe that she deserved to be alongside her sisters again. The day of the new meeting with the social worker was approaching, and instead of anxiety, Kristen felt a mix of anticipation and courage. She didn't know what the future held, but now she was more prepared to face it. The light of hope she had found within herself guided her, and she was determined not to let doubts paralyze her again. Kristen was ready to fight, not just for her sisters, but for her own happiness. The journey would still be long, but she knew that with love and determination, she could overcome any challenge. And finally, she could see a path ahead, illuminated by the love she had always felt for Cynthia and Sarah. Kristen sat at her desk once again, surrounded by notes and books, but this time there was a small difference. Instead of sinking into doubts, she took a deep breath and decided it was time to take action. The meeting with the social worker was approaching, and although a part of her trembled with anxiety, another part was beginning to feel stronger. She picked up a pen and started to write a plan. It didn't have to be perfect, it just needed to be a step. I'm going to prepare for this meeting. I can do this, Kristen thought, feeling a wave of determination. She made a list of topics she wanted to discuss and began to jot down everything she had learned in her course on custody rights. This simple action helped her realize that each piece of information was a tool, a piece she could use to build the future she wanted for her sisters. In the following days, Kristen began to focus on small victories. Each time she completed a task, no matter how small, a sense of relief washed over her. One morning, upon waking up, she decided she would prepare breakfast in a special way. "Today is pancake day," she said to herself as she mixed the ingredients. The sweet smell of pancakes baking brought a smile to her face and, for a moment, made her forget the pressures surrounding her. At that breakfast, she was not alone. Laura came to visit her, and the two took the moment to connect. While they ate, Kristen shared her worries about the meeting. "Laura, what if I don't know how to answer the questions? What if they think I'm not capable?" The insecurity still haunted her. Laura smiled warmly. "Kristen, you're preparing. That's already a big step. And remember, if you don't know something, you can ask. No one expects you to have all the answers. What matters is that you're making an effort." Those words helped Kristen see things from a new perspective. She realized that perfection was not the goal. What mattered was the willingness to get up and try. The day of the meeting arrived, and instead of letting anxiety take over, she remembered everything she had learned. As she entered the room, she felt a wave of nervousness, but also a spark of courage. During the meeting, the questions came, and some caught her by surprise. But instead of letting it get her down, she remembered what Laura had said. "If I don't know, I can ask." And so she did. When she was unsure, Kristen asked for clarification, and by the end, she realized she was doing well. The feeling of control began to grow within her, and she felt that she was indeed fighting for her sisters. After the meeting, she left with a smile on her face. "I did it," she thought. "I really did it." And although there was much more ahead, she felt she had taken an important step. This sense of accomplishment motivated her to keep going. As the weeks went by, Kristen began to apply the lessons she had learned about acceptance and growth. She realized that her mistakes were not failures, but learning opportunities. One afternoon, while reviewing her notes, she paused to reflect on a mistake she had made in a previous task. Instead of criticizing herself, she smiled and said, "This is part of the process." This shift in mindset was a game changer. Conversations with Laura also became deeper. In one of those conversations, Laura asked, "Kristen, what do you really want for your sisters?" That question made her think. She didn't just want to bring them back home, she wanted them to grow up in an environment filled with love and acceptance. "I want them to know they are loved and that they can be who they really are," Kristen replied, her voice firm. It was then that their friendship solidified even further. Laura was not just a friend, she became a pillar of support, someone who helped her see the world in a new way. Kristen began to realize that relationships were fundamental to her journey. True success was not just about achieving her goals, but about building bonds that would help her face challenges. Kristen decided it was time to open her heart and share her journey with others. She began to participate more actively in the support group, where she found other women facing similar struggles. At one meeting, upon hearing the story of a woman who had overcome a similar challenge, Kristen felt a wave of empathy. "We are stronger together," she said, and that resonated with everyone present. The connection she formed with those women helped her see that she was not alone in her struggle. Kristen's journey was not easy, but she began to realize that every small step mattered. She learned to be kind to herself, to accept her limitations, and to celebrate her accomplishments, no matter how small. She was becoming the sister she had always wanted to be, and, more importantly, she was becoming the person she had always wanted to be. With this new perspective, Kristen felt more prepared for the future. The road would still be long, but the light of hope she had found within herself guided her. Now she knew that, with love and determination, she could overcome any challenge that lay ahead. And finally, she could see a path forward, illuminated by the love she had always felt for Cynthia and Sarah, and by the strength she discovered within herself. Kristen was sitting at her desk, surrounded by papers and books, with her heart racing. The day of the hearing was approaching, and the pressure was mounting with every passing moment. What should have been a moment of hope was turning into a storm of uncertainties. She looked at the list she had made for the meeting with the social worker and felt a knot in her throat. There were so many things she wanted to say, so many questions she feared she wouldn't be able to answer. But at the same time, there was something different that morning. The determination that had begun to blossom inside her was now mixed with palpable anxiety. What if everything goes wrong? What if they decide I'm not capable of taking care of my sisters? The idea of losing Cynthia and Sarah again paralyzed her, and a chill ran down her spine. Kristen took a deep breath and decided she needed to prepare herself. She got up and started walking around the house, trying to find clarity. As she walked, she remembered Laura's words. "What's important is that you are trying." Those words echoed in her mind like a mantra, but insecurity still consumed her. On the day of the hearing, as she looked at herself in the mirror, Kristen saw a different woman. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and her eyes showed signs of fatigue, but there was a spark that hadn't been there before. She wore a blouse that always made her feel confident, and with one last look in the mirror, she told herself she was ready. As she entered the room, a wave of nervousness hit her. The atmosphere was cold and formal, with people sitting at the table looking at her. The social worker, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, asked her to introduce herself. Kristen felt the words escape her mind. "Why am I here? What am I going to say?" Doubt enveloped her, but she remembered her list. With a trembling voice, she began to talk about her sisters and how important their lives were to her. As she spoke, a part of her mind wondered if she was doing it the right way. When the social worker began to ask questions, anxiety took over her again. "Do you have the financial means to care for them?" He looked at her expectantly, and Kristen felt the weight of the question. The truth was that she was struggling to support herself. "No, I don't," she replied, her voice almost fading away. The social worker paused, and the tension in the room increased. Kristen felt her heart race. She knew that this answer could be the reason her sisters wouldn't come home. "But I can manage," she hurried to say, her voice firmer now. "I'm trying, I'm learning, and I have people around me who support me." The man watched her, and the expression on his face was one of skepticism. "What if you fail again? What guarantees that you won't repeat the mistakes of the past?" The question cut like a knife, and Kristen felt the pain and shame of what had happened before. She remembered the nights she felt lost, the feeling of failure that haunted her. The silence in the room was deafening, and Kristen found herself on the verge of tears. But then the memory of Laura hit her like a ray of light. "You are not alone," she thought. "You can ask for help." Kristen took a deep breath and decided she could not let herself be defeated. "I have failed, and I know that. But I have also learned from my mistakes. I am here because I want to be a better sister. I want to give them a home where they feel loved and safe." The words came out with more strength than she expected. Kristen looked into the eyes of the social worker, trying to find understanding. "I don't want to just be a provider, I want to be a positive presence in their lives. I want you to know that you can count on me, that I am willing to fight for them." The others in the room began to pay attention. The tense atmosphere seemed to dissolve a bit. The social worker paused, her expression softening. "This is important, Kristen, but you need to show that you are willing to do what it takes." The pressure increased again, but the determination inside Kristen kept her from backing down. "I am willing to do anything. I am here for them, and I will keep fighting, no matter what happens." The social worker nodded slowly, and Kristen felt a wave of relief mixed with nervousness. She knew there was still much to be done, but at that moment, she had found her voice. Leaving the room, she felt she had overcome a major obstacle. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a decisive step. Kristen realized it was not just about gaining custody of her sisters, it was about becoming the woman she had always wanted to be, a strong, courageous woman capable of loving unconditionally. Looking back, she saw that she had learned the importance of facing her fears, being vulnerable, and allowing herself to fail, because each failure was an opportunity for a fresh start. And with this new wisdom, Kristen was ready to continue her fight, not just for her sisters, but also for herself. She knew that regardless of what happened, she had found her inner strength and, with that, could face any challenge life presented her. Kristen left the hearing room with a tight chest, but a new determination pulsed within her. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she knew she had taken a crucial step toward becoming the sister and woman she had always wanted to be. The conversation with the social worker had been exhausting, but the words she spoke, filled with sincerity and emotion, left her with a sense of relief. She not only stood up for her sisters, but also for herself. As she walked home, her mind filled with reflections. Kristen remembered every moment she hesitated, every mistake that led her to this hearing. The shame and fear that had accompanied her were beginning to dissipate. She realized that for a long time she had lived trapped in the past, carrying the weight of her failures. But now, instead of seeing them as barriers, she began to view them as lessons. Each mistake was a learning opportunity, a chance for a fresh start. When she entered the house, the atmosphere was different. Cynthia and Sarah were there, laughing and playing on the couch. The simple sight of them brought a smile to her face. Kristen approached, sitting down beside them. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to hide the anxiety that still pulsed inside her. The girls looked at her, their eyes shining with joy. "It was great. The teacher let us draw whatever we wanted," said Cynthia, showing a colorful drawing of a radiant sun. Sarah, shyer, nodded in agreement. Kristen felt a warmth in her heart seeing her sister's happiness. "Can I see it?" She took the drawing and praised it, realizing that these small moments were what truly mattered. The connection with her sisters was what she wanted to protect and nurture. But deep down, Kristen knew there was still much to be done. The social worker had made it clear that despite her words, actions would speak louder. She needed to show that she was willing to change, that she was capable of taking care of the girls. With this in mind, she decided it was time to act. In the days that followed, Kristen began to seek help. She enrolled in financial management courses and joined support groups. With each new piece of information she absorbed, she felt more confident. Life was not easy, but she was determined to transform her reality. Financial difficulties were still a constant struggle, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, Kristen began to see the challenges as opportunities for growth. Her sisters, in turn, began to notice the change. Kristen became more present, aware of every small gesture. She organized game nights, helped with homework, and above all, listened. It was a process of rebuilding, not just her life, but also her relationship with Cynthia and Sarah. They were learning to trust her again, and that was a big step. One afternoon, while they were making cookies in the kitchen, Kristen turned to the girls. "I want you to know that I am doing my best for us to stay together. Sometimes things can be tough, but I want you to know that I will always be here for you." The girls looked at her seriously, and Kristen felt her words were having an effect. "I know you are trying," said Sarah with a shy smile. "We want everything to work out too." That response touched Kristen's heart. She realized that even with the difficulties, there was love and hope in their small family. And more importantly, the friendship she had cultivated with Laura, her colleague in the support group, began to blossom. Laura not only supported her emotionally, but also encouraged her to seek ways to improve her situation. Together they faced challenges and celebrated small victories. Over time, Kristen began to understand that true success was not just about achieving a material goal, but about building a home full of love and security. Every laugh shared with her sisters, every moment of learning, were achievements that could not be measured in financial terms. They were the essence of the life she had always wanted to offer Cynthia and Sarah. On the day of the new hearing, Kristen was nervous but also excited. She had worked hard to show that she was capable. She entered the room with her sisters by her side, and this time the social worker seemed more receptive. Kristen presented her progress and how much she had changed. Hearing her words, the girls intervened, sharing how they felt about everything their sister had done for them. By the end of that hearing, Kristen left with a new sense of hope. The social worker recognized her efforts and the importance of family unity. She knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt she was on the right path. Kristen understood that life was made up of ups and downs, but what really mattered was how she faced each challenge. She was no longer the woman who was defeated by fear and insecurity. Instead, she had become a resilient woman who, above all, was willing to fight for what truly mattered, her family. And so, with a heart full of love and new hopes, Kristen looked to the future. The journey was long, but she was ready to take it, not just for her sisters, but for herself. Kristen looked out the window, watching the sun set behind the trees in the nearby park. It was a spectacle of colors that reflected the transformation that had occurred in her life over the past few months. The journey that had begun with uncertainties and fears was now unfolding into a path illuminated by hope and love. With a smile on her face, she remembered all the difficulties she had faced, the sleepless nights worrying about the future, and the tears she had shed. But more important than the difficulties were the lessons she had learned along the way. The hearing had been a turning point, but what really made the difference were the small changes she implemented every day. The friendship with Laura also had a profound impact on her life. Laura was not just a fellow support group member, she became a journey companion. Together, they explored new opportunities, shared challenges, and celebrated achievements. The connection they formed showed Kristen that friendship could be a fundamental pillar in times of crisis. She learned to value the people around her, to seek support, and to offer help to those who were also facing their own battles. Kristen realized that her strength did not come only from her determination, but also from the unconditional support she received from Cynthia and Sarah. They were her foundation, and with each shared laugh, she felt stronger. The playful moments in the kitchen, the game nights, and the heartfelt conversations created an unbreakable bond between them. Kristen saw that by opening up to her sisters, she was also allowing herself to be vulnerable, and that made her stronger. Kristen reflected on how her view of success had changed. Previously, she believed that having a stable job and a big house was the definition of a successful life. Now she understood that true success lay in the relationship she cultivated and in her ability to rise again after falls. Wealth was no longer measured in material possessions, but in the amount of love and happiness she shared with her sisters and friends. This new perspective motivated her to become a better person every day. Kristen's path was not perfect and she still faced challenges, but now she had the courage to face them head-on. Instead of letting fear take over, she remembered that each obstacle was an opportunity to learn and grow. She had become a woman who did not fear her failures but accepted them as part of her journey. Looking back, she saw how each mistake had helped her find her true self, a stronger and more resilient version of herself. Over time, Kristen realized that the lessons she learned were not just for her, but also for her sisters. She wanted Cynthia and Sarah to grow up knowing they could overcome any difficulty, that their failures did not define them, but rather how they reacted to them. Thus, she began to share her experiences, encouraging them to be honest about their feelings and to support each other. The impact of her journey extended beyond her home. Kristen began to get involved in community projects, sharing her story of overcoming adversity and offering support to other families facing similar difficulties. She discovered that by helping others, she was also helping herself. Her story inspired others to fight for their own changes, bringing a new purpose to her life. Kristen was no longer the same woman who had walked into the hearing room months ago. She knew that life would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. With a heart full of gratitude, she looked at her sisters who were playing together in a corner and realized that true wealth was there, in every smile, in every shared moment. And so, with a renewed spirit, Kristen moved forward, ready to embrace life and all it had to offer. Kristen watched her sisters playing and felt a wave of emotion thinking about everything she had accomplished. She had reinvented herself, built a new identity, and cultivated a home filled with love, laughter, and hope. Looking to the future, she felt ready to face any challenge that came her way, not just for herself, but also for Cynthia and Sarah. The journey was long, but now every step she took was a step toward a brighter future. That day, as the sun set, Kristen made a promise to herself. She promised to continue learning, growing, and striving to be the best version of herself. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago she felt lost, surrounded by doubts and fears. Now, with the sun setting in a colorful sky, she knew she had transformed from the inside out. The path had not been easy, but every step was worth it. The support from Cynthia and Sarah, the friendship with Laura, and the lessons learned along this journey shaped a new version of herself, stronger and capable of facing any adversity. As the laughter of the sisters echoed in the air, Kristen decided it was time to reflect on everything she had experienced. She remembered the nights she would sit on the couch, her heart heavy and her mind filled with questions. What would the future hold? How would she face the challenges that seemed insurmountable? Over time, she realized that the answer lay not just within herself, but in the connections she had cultivated. Cynthia and Sarah were not just her sisters, they were her life partners, her confidants, her best friends. They helped her see the light in the darkness and believe that love and friendship could be true beacons in times of crisis. "Kristen, you seem so different now," Cynthia said, interrupting her sister's thoughts. "You look happier." "I am happy," Kristen replied with a genuine smile. "And it's all because of you guys. I learned that challenges bring us closer. Every obstacle we faced brought more love between us." Sarah, with a mischievous grin, added, "And who would have thought that game nights and movie marathons would become our remedy?" Kristen laughed. "It's true, but it's more than that. It's about how we support each other and learn to be vulnerable. That's what has strengthened us. However, life always brings surprises." As the conversation flowed and the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, Kristen's phone buzzed. It was a message from Laura. An invitation to a new support group meeting where she would share her experiences and help others like herself. Kristen felt a chill in her stomach as she read the message. It was an opportunity, but also a responsibility. She hesitated, wondering if she was really ready for this. The sisters noticed the change in her expression. "What happened?" Cynthia asked, concerned. "Laura invited me to speak at the group again."
"I'm excited, but also a little nervous," Kristen said, gripping her phone tightly. "Nervous? You're amazing, and your story can help so many people," Sarah said excitedly. "You've been through so much and still got back up. That's inspiring." Those words touched Kristen's heart. She realized that her journey was not just about herself, it was an opportunity to impact other lives. The truth was that even amidst her insecurities, she had something valuable to share.
What she had learned could be a beacon for those still in the dark. Kristen took a deep breath, feeling determination grow within her. "You're right, I'm going to do this, and if I can help someone find the light, then it will all be worth it." As the sun finally set and night fell, Kristen felt she was at a new crossroads. She had overcome many obstacles, but now she had the chance to be a source of hope for others. And deep down, she knew this would be yet another step in her journey of growth. A few days later, at the support group, Kristen took the stage and looked out at the audience. She saw worried faces, eyes full of doubt, and hearts eager for change. With a steady voice, she shared her story, her struggle, her victories, and above all, the power of love and friendship. What she did not expect was the warm response she would receive. At the end of her talk, people stood up, applauding not just her courage, but also the hope she had sown in their hearts. The turning point came when, as she left the stage, a young woman approached Kristen with tears in her eyes. "You have no idea how much your words changed my life. I was about to give up, but now I see there is hope. Thank you." Kristen felt a lump in her throat. It was in that moment that she understood the depth of her journey. What had begun as a personal struggle was now transforming into a legacy of love and resilience. And as she left the event, she realized that the transformation of her life was just beginning. Life, with all its uncertainties, still had so much to offer, and she was ready to embrace it. Kristen looked up at the starry sky and made a promise to herself. She would continue to grow, learn, and above all, inspire. And so, with a heart full of gratitude, she moved forward, knowing that each step of her journey could also be a step to help others find their own light. And you? What lessons has life taught you? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can create a network of support and inspiration for those who need it most. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start today the journey of transformation that can change not only your life, but the lives of many others as well.